So this man's basically living in Sweden, and he's got the U.S. coming to him. And what's he doing? Right next to where he's building the next nuclear bomb is a meth lab, but he's not selling it. He's just doing it himself.
He needs the meth so he can make the bombs. It just makes sense, all right? Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 169. I'm your host, Ryan, here with the other host, Edge.
All right, we finally made it to the nice number of the hundreds. I can't wait for another 100 more episodes so I can make this joke again.
I wasn't even paying attention.
Got-y!
We're back. Housekeeping up top. We have a long one, so we want to get into it quickly. You can listen to us everywhere. Visit us at podcastcore.com. That's podcastcor.com for all of our info. Email us at the same name at gmail.com. Follow us on all the platforms because that helps us with discoverability. We appreciate it. And then leave a like and comment wherever you listen or watch or whatever the most. But tell a friend, because word of mouth has got us this far, to learn how to commit war crimes by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast. If you're a listener that has, I hope this is not your first episode, because you would know us if you, listen, it's not us. We don't mean it as a joke. Listen to our rest of our episodes. We're good. Don't worry. We're the good guys.
Hey, as a first generation American, and you as a legal resident, don't tell them to come to us to learn how to make war crimes. And you're Canadian. I don't know how I should take that statement.
Yeah, the two immigrants are not. The two islanders shouldn't be. You know what? Let's just stop, because the algorithm's probably just picking this up and sending it directly to the federal government. Today we're talking about Singed, in what we've titled "A Poisoned Mind," and this is interesting. We mentioned we were going to do this in the past. That there's some stories that have been retconned or changed to fit into this new phase of how Arcane is modifying pre-existing stories in League of Legends. As we said, we're on board with it, but we always like to go back to these things, right? These older stories to essentially say, where did they leave off before they made another change? And the reason we do that is because, sort of like Star Wars Legends, right? When that stuff got retconned, it was no longer canon, they still pull certain elements that worked. You know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the same thing we will see here as we talk about what Singe's story was before Arcane happened.
Yeah, and it's very fun to see, like, as far as, like, not only to see the pieces that fit, but it's very fun to see why the pieces that ended up on the cutting floor, why they ended up there. Because sometimes it's clear enough that it's like, okay, this makes sense as far as to switch it up because of where the story ended up going. And so it's fun to see how all these pieces ended up coming together. If you don't find it that fun, well, then just enjoy Sin's bio. And then, you know, you could be one of those people that it's like, hey, I know what he was like before Arcane. And yeah, it's definitely a fun party trick and totally not the reason why I'm single.
So before we start, this story is written by Ian St. Martin, and he's a former now. He's no longer there, unfortunately. When they did the round of layoffs, he got caught up in that. He worked both on League of Legends and Legends of Runeterra as a senior narrative writer, and he did good work. So it sucks that he's not there anymore. They definitely lost a talent there. And the additional thing here is this version of Singe's story wasn't even the first version either. There were, I think,
right,
at least 3 iterations on this bio to get to this point. So this being as close as it is to what we end up getting in Arcane is impressive.
Yeah, and this is one of the reasons that there has been so many changes is because Singed, which we are going to get into, but ever since the beginning of League of Legends, Singed has always been the weapons master, or like the alchemist of Noxus. Like
Yeah.
he's always been the one, the mad scientist making
Mhm.
the weapons of mass destruction. So since he's so tightly knit with Noxus, his story has always been kind of changing to fit whatever narrative was happening, even when the narratives weren't writing the story. And the narrative was, we're going to have a fun tournament to name a new item in the game, and it's going to be Noxus versus Ionia. Like his story's changed a lot, but even though this is the most recent one, there's going to be some inconsistencies to what you probably know Singed as if you've been watching Arcane. So it'll be fun to kind of tell you what those inconsistencies are if you don't know them, or if we miss something, you could always tell us what we missed, because his story's changed a lot, and we're just going to talk about the most recent one.
Yeah, I mean, even at some point, he was Demacian, if I remember correctly, in his original lore. So, like Hetcha mentioned, it's changed a
Yeah.
lot. Let's get into it. We start all good stories in 3 parts, and this one's long enough to do it. So, part 1, we start with Singed, born in Piltover, and as a child, he was considered a prodigy and extremely curious. So, when he ended up getting older, he decided to take a scholarship at the University of Piltover.
Yeah, and this is pretty much in line with what we know from Arcane. Like we do know that he was involved in the academy. That is 100% locked in stone with Caitlyn's investigation in season 2. So far, all good. We're familiar territory.
Smooth sailing. And then we go on to see like Singe's specialty and what he enjoyed was the natural sciences. And he made groundbreaking discoveries along the way as he studied. But unfortunately, around this time period is when the Hex Tech discovery happens. And this is where the scientific world began to focus its attention. And Singed was against it from the start. He was a naysayer, he was anti Hex Tech. And since he saw it as like a magical crutch of sorts for those who struggle with understanding the natural world. And he was very vocal about it, which made him a target.
Yeah, and this is where you can kind of see, like, as far as in the story, the kind of the position that Singed was put in when he was first initially made a Piltover character, instead of just being essentially an Noxian prisoner. But this is the distinction that you can see with what they were trying to build, because this is the direct kind of opposite of why Heimerdinger was afraid of Hextech.
Yeah.
Heimerdinger is afraid of Hextech because he recognizes the potential of it. He also remembers the last time the mortal world was playing around with magic.
Hmm.
Like, two reasons to be wary of Hextech, and for Heimerdinger, it was out of fear. Singed is afraid of it because it's making things too easy. People are relying on it too much because they don't understand alchemy well, and I'm trying to preserve more of like what science should be, or
Yeah.
like what science has been for all this time. So it's more of like a conservative kind of viewpoint, and that's the direct opposite of like Heimerdinger. He doesn't recognize the potential of Hextech at all.
Yeah.
All that is just these kids being lazy because they can get the newspaper on their phone.
you know,
And-
you put it so perfectly that I immediately thought of it as like Heimendinger lived through Chernobyl and was like, nuclear power may not be great because of what he experienced. Whereas Singed looked at, nuclear power and was like, well, we can just build dams, just do dams better. It's a
yeah,
better use of the natural flowing water. You guys just don't
yeah.
understand how to harness it properly. It's
My
like that.
grandfather was a coal miner. Okay, nuclear power is awesome.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, well, great point there. So Singe ended up changing his focus from just the pure, natural sciences to alchemy. And then this is results in kind of a negative reaction from the fellow academics who's like, hey, you're hating on Hex Tech, but now you're going into a space that's kind of frowned upon, right? And this led his research funding to essentially dry up. And then later he was forced out of the university. And this is when he decides to move to Zaun. And that leaves off part 1.
And this is one of the changes that I do kind of like because we do know like obviously arcane spoilers if we hadn't made that warning yet. But we do get to see as far as in arcane that like this part of the origin story has been changed because in arcane he's kicked out of the academy because he's doing a lot of really bad experiments
Yeah.
and he's now a wanted man.
Hmm.
Whereas over here, it's just more of like he's so set in his ways and he refuses to adapt so much that people just stop investing in him.
Yep.
And if you don't have the money to actually make experiments or, well, run your experiments to make discoveries and contribute to the sciences, then you're not bringing anything to the table, which means you're not going to make any more money.
Yep.
So he just goes broke, and that is definitely more of like a realistic
Yeah.
storyline.
Yeah.
But his new storyline makes sense because of the story that they gave us in Arcane.
Great point. So part two starts with him getting there, and he loves it. Zaun's cheaper, there's a thirst for innovation, and there's little ethical concern in how you reach that innovation, which fits him perfectly at this point in his life. And he begins making a name for himself fairly quickly and pushes the field forward at a blinding pace. But this came at a cost of his health, and which is now getting into the physical representation of the character we know.
And this is one of the things that I kind of miss as far as like Arcane doesn't show this part, which is the toll that Singe takes on himself. And honestly, it might be something just they just decide to retcon because they show him getting caught up in the explosion, like in Silco's lab.
Yeah.
Uh, but this is hysterical because it's like, oh, like you just said it. He loves it because there's no ethical concerns. Like so there's no red tape stopping me.
Yeah.
So one, who knows what kind of experiments he's doing, but the two, it's like, what's the first thing that I'm gonna do? Stimulants. I'm gonna find all the narcotics, and this man's just going on bender after bender. So because I can do more if I have more time. What's taking up my time? Sleep.
Yeah, in a very Zoomer fashion, he starts stimming, but not in the same way. Yeah, he develops he develops his own, by the way. So he makes his own stimulant that allows him to essentially work for weeks without rest. But then this would make him crash, but it would only, quote unquote, leave him debilitated for days. So he's gaining time, right? It's a great trade-off. And this made him more desirable for clients because he was basically always available to do whatever you need. And specifically, the War Masons of Noxus got his attention and became his biggest client.
Oh man. And this is the dream of every mad scientist, which is to land a government contract. Because if you can get the government money, you don't have to worry about it drying up again. And,
Yep.
so yeah, he not only does he have a government contract now, he caught the attention of like this world's version of the United States military.
Foreign investment, baby.
So this man's basically living in Sweden and he's got the US coming to him. And what's he doing? Right next to where he's building the next nuclear bomb is a meth lab, but he's not selling it, he's just doing it himself.
He needs the meth so he can make the bombs. It just makes sense, all right? We will talk about his lab. His lab's actually mentioned as far as how dangerous and hectic it is, and is pretty much killing him as well because your meth lab is connected to your bomb lab. We've talked about Ziggs. Go listen to our Ziggs episode.
Yeah. So not only that, but like we're making jokes of making nukes, but like he is legitimately making chemical bombs.
Yeah.
So that it's like he never leaves his lab because that's where he makes his meth, and he needs that to work in the lab. So since the meth lab's right there too, like we can make the chemical warfare over here, and the man never leaves that. So his only break from meth is breathing in chemical weapons.
And Zaun is underground. Okay, so so there's this rumor going around that Noxus is essentially going broke. The empire is on the verge of bankruptcy because they're currently like their biggest expense is paying Piltover for passage during their campaigns to northern Shurima. We've talked about geography at length. Just think about like the Panama Canal, right?
Yep.
And they're spending the bulk of their money to try to do that, ultimately to find ways to make more money by more, imperialism. And this leads them to seek conquest elsewhere for resources, and they needed help from Singe to do that.
Yeah, so like the option that Singed is giving them is that he's making everything very cheap because again, there's little ethical concerns in Zaun, so he can cut every corner, like just like he's cutting the corner of sleep. So this is now a mutually beneficent relationship for both parties because Noxus needs a cheaper alternative to keep the war machine going while
Yeah.
also trying to increase profits. Singed needs a steady income so that he can keep making the other experiments that he wants to do on the side that's not just the chemical weapons that his clients want. So it's like mutually beneficent now. But I do hope that when we get the next season of Arcane, that we get to see more of like this whole like the world trade with like
Yeah.
the Noxus Empire paying Piltover to like get into Shurima. I don't know if they'll keep it exactly the same way, but I do want to see more of that because makes Runeterra feel real, and that's very good information to have in the world building, so that a lot of the stuff that we love to talk about on the show makes a little bit more sense.
Yeah, people make fun of the prequels because trade disputes, quote unquote. But actually, we want that. We want trade disputes because this is a show, it's not a
Yeah.
movie. So we want
Yep.
Andor, right? We want to see the inner workings, especially when our main character is now Mel, someone who is heavily in that space. It makes sense to tell that story. She's not like a Jedi, right? Like so
Yeah.
it makes sense to do it this way.
It is excellent world building. It builds wonderful stories, but it is talking about a bunch of accountants, and
Yeah.
that's so. Some people are just like, "Nah, we're making a Michael Bay film," and not everything needs to be a Michael Bay film.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we got listen, season 1 and season 2 had a lot of action. We can tone it back a bit and tell some really deep trade disputes.
Mhm.
All right. So essentially the small projects to start out this relationship became large projects until one day a military commander, name is irrelevant, they don't exist anymore, asked him to develop a new kind of weapon that would break the stalemate in the Ionian War. So we now have a time frame. And the commander promised that this project would make him wealthy.
And I'm a nerd, so the commander's name is Emisten.
Yeah.
And you know what? Yeah, R.I.P. Emiston. Uh,
We'll just say sounds very Shuriman. We're gonna say it's Shuriman.
we'll go with that. but yeah, like with this, it's like okay, this is exactly what Singe. Well, not just Singe, but this is exactly what every creator and developer is looking for, right? Like a steady income to continue the work that you already want to do. So it's just beneficial for Singed that he not only has this deal, but the work that he wants to do is to make really deadly chemicals or really good meth.
Yeah.
So, like, and then if World War II has taught us anything, some militaries are willing to look at meth. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. If you haven't figured out by this point, Singe is not a good guy. He didn't start off a good guy. There was never a case where he's a good guy. He is not a good one. But this takes us to part 3 here. And like Hetch mentioned, this is exactly what Singe wanted. And he put all of his experience and time into this project. And the result was a brutal alchemical fire that was unstable, volatile, and monstrous. When it was used in Ionia, it was so hot that it could break stone and taint the earth it touched. So it contained a dense metallic poison that ensured that nothing would be able to grow wherever it was used. And it was so devastating that even the allies of the commander were disgusted, but they weren't disgusted enough to pursue the commander and Singed as war criminals.
now that needs a bald eagle screech behind it because hell yeah, like it's well it killed their guys and not ours. Like it's so
Not our land.
if we can make the rules, we make the rules. So as long as we say it's okay. Like,
Exactly.
but yeah, this is going to be something that will be interesting to see how Singe story is going to be implemented going further
Yeah.
because this is a very pivotal point for the world of Ionia and for a few characters in Ionia, namely Shin, um, namely Shin, and then some of the more like spiritual characters or Vestian characters like Ari and Ivern. Like nature is very much tied with the spiritual world in Ionia.
Hmm.
So the fact that this is leaving permanent scars in the landscape and nothing else can grow from there is going to have really big effects on the stories, and it already has. We haven't seen it yet because as far as in Arcane, we haven't got there yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Singed is the cause for a lot of really bad crap that happened in some of the Ionian stories. And this is the moment that caused those.
Yep. And now he's a wealthy man. He's obviously disconnected from this group, right? Not a war criminal, but hey, we'll cut ties. And he's now has all the resources he'll ever need. So he moves on into his next personal, like final project. And during this time frame, he's getting more sickly just due to the practices up to this point. He sacrificed his body to do the research he's done. So he begins to focus on more biological subjects. He experiments merging animals, men, and machines, and even one of his projects was free and roaming in Zaun, something that was kept for the show. And we get to the end here where Singed, who in his own mind, he's already mastered the destruction of flesh. So now he's focused on the preservation and transformation of it to his ultimate goal, which is essentially defeating death itself. And that's where our story leaves off. So going to our discussion section, you might automatically understand that the singed we're given in Arcane is much more redeemable than this version. And that feels like it's on purpose because Singed became a character that people started to care about. And if you had this Singed with everything else going on in that type of story, it would either fade to the background or be too hard nosed, right? To be like, hey, he's a really bad guy, blah, blah. It's like now you have with the switch we have where essentially his pursuit was guided by saving his daughter, which we think is Oriana. Well, how do you now take that person and have them still be, because we don't know the timeline there, but have him still be involved in producing one of the worst war weapons ever, right? Like, how do
And
you get him to make um, the atomic bomb and drop and have it drop on Hiroshima and Nagasaki? And then from the character we're given, right? Because that's essentially what this is.
yes.
How do you make him the
And
father of the bomb?
and it will be interesting to see like what direction Riot goes in because it's unavoidable. Like this is a direction that we are going to have to go in.
Yeah.
Like there may be like some little course adjustments to line up with the rest of the story, but you can't we can't tell the story of, making the bomb without the actual experiment of dropping it. Like you can't tell the story of the war crime and ignore the crime.
Yeah.
Like that's it. That like pure and simple. So, but I even though I'm harping on that, I want to make it clear that I do like the direction that Singed has gone in
Yeah.
because I think it was a good direction to go in to make subtle nods to like the rest of the world that isn't going to be talked about in Arcane. Like Arcane wasn't the story to tell everyone's story.
Yeah.
It's to build the blueprint of how all those other stories came to be. And Singed is a very important character, so he has to be there. But he's so important that he has to be a character that you want to follow around for a bit, right? So it's like, hey, everyone loves a story of like a father, like a loving father, right? And everyone loves all of the characters of League of Legends. Well, I say everyone, but it's like all the
Yeah.
characters of League of Legends have their fans. And it's like, okay, so what if we give a shout out to a lot of the OGs who love Oriana? There's an Oriana shout out, and now we have a character that you're gonna feel okay following to Noxus and see what happens next. So I love the direction they went in. But it is very interesting that they made him a character that's lovable because we still got to drop the bomb. Like,
Yeah.
how are people going to react when this Singe drops the bomb? Because the other Singe did, yeah, that's what he was going to do.
From the moment it said Singe was
Yeah,
born in Piltover, I was like, yeah, he's gonna drop the bomb.
yeah,
That's him.
and
That's all I needed.
so that's all we needed. And so it's like the other Singe, no worries. We knew where that was going, but this
Yeah.
Singe is going to be a little bit interesting to see how the fans receive it. I'm more interested to see, like, are we going to see him drop the bomb first, or one of the things that wasn't touched on in the new version of his bio, are we going to see him make Scion first? Because like this is Scion is still in a weird space where it's he was brought back by the Noxian War Masons,
Mhm.
but the Noxians War Masons have more than just the Chemtech on their side.
Yeah.
Like I'm like we just had an episode where we talked at length about LeBlanc and
Yeah.
how long she's been around, and characters like Mordekaiser is a friggin' necromancer. So who knows? Scion's story might be changed,
Yeah.
but Singe is originally the father of Frankenstein's monster. So I wonder if we're going to touch on that before we touch on the crimes in Ionia. Like
Yeah.
it's
Obviously,
interesting.
go listen to our Scion episode. But the way I see it playing out, because of the timing of everything, we had Oppenheimer. And there's a reason I mentioned and brought up the bombs and the father of the
Hmm.
bombs. And I did that because I think their plan with the current Singed is to go the way of Oppenheimer and how that story is told. Because Oppenheimer does have, like, his story has a theme of redeemability, right, in
Yeah.
it, and being kind of a victim of circumstance, in regards to his talent, right, being used for the wrong purpose and then getting, you know, essentially manipulated into doing ultimately the wrong thing. And with what we know about Oriana's story, go listen to our Oriana episode, what we know about the current Singed we have, and what we know about Oppenheimer in history, and then also the media that we've had shown of him, I feel like they're going to combine the tragic story of Oriana's father in her story, her original story, and Singed being her father falling into the situation where he ends up producing one of the most dangerous things Runeterra knows, right? Because we have all the other pieces. Hextech's around. We have Where Noxus, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, Oriana's back. He's a loving father, but we do know that at some point, Oriana's life becomes difficult where he has to sacrifice himself in some way. So what if now there's a financial issue and the current Singed has to find a way out? He has some ties to Noxus because when Ambessa was around, he was helping out. What if he kind of, taps the glass a bit and they bring him in willingly and then things start to ramp up and he loses control of his own agency and he ends up making the alchemical fire? Like, I think that's the way they'll go with it because audiences already prepped for it, right?
Yeah.
We've ingested that type of story. We accepted it. Oppenheimer did great. It blew up a bunch of records. Pun intended. I didn't mean to do that, but it was a story that was well told, and everyone said that the best part about it was Christopher Nolan did not make him a good guy, right?
Yeah.
But everyone
It,
understood what happened and why.
No, he told a human story.
Yeah,
Like it's a very human story, which means that you like can put yourselves in their shoes, right?
yeah,
And that's why it had its success. I fully agree with you. I think that going the Oppenheimer route is kind of a no brainer, and it's going to be more interesting to see where the differences in Sin's story versus the Oppenheimer story, like where they fork and what choices Singe decides to make at those forks. Um, honestly, I think the only add-on that I have is like maybe Riot can make like a little short film for like the next Star Guardians to release at the same time as episode 1 of Arcane 3, and that will be the Barbie. All right.
Okay.
So we could have the full Barbenheimer experience.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. But yeah,
That's the only addition I have to your notes.
yeah. Listen, if any rioters are listening, or any people who are connected to rioters, tell them Casuals Runeterra said, just do Oppenheimer.
Just do Oppenheimer.
Listen, you have our information, podcastcore.com. You can get in touch with us. I mean, we'll write it. We'll try our best.
And honestly, I think our best is okay.
Yeah.
You know.
It's rooted in practice.
It is rooted.
Right? It's not
like, could you imagine if someone's listening to this with no context and they think that we're like dead serious that like we could write this, like, despite the fact that we're always talking about which authors are writing our favorite stories. Like, I can stand up here with the great Graham.
Yeah. We can stand where he stood. But yeah, all I have to say is I think if we want to have one final say here, do we like the changes? I think we've explained that we think all the changes that were made work within Arcane while retaining what Singed is. So if you're a Singed fan, because you have those people that come out the woodwork like, you should have never touched him, he was perfect before. Listen, art is iterative, okay? And this was a good iteration. So I think as someone who played OG Singed, and liked the character and how the character was set up, like, this is cool. I like what they did with it. Gives it more depth. And it also, we mentioned this as stuff was airing in our, week to week episodes, was that Singe surprised us with how much we were interested in seeing him interact with the rest of the characters.
Yeah, that is the ultimate sign of good writing, is that like you get pulled in. Like, you should be more interested in learning more about that character. And honestly, like, one of the reasons that I love the changes that they've made is because it's given Singe depth. Like, Singe has always been a bad guy. He's always been a bad guy. But for the most part, the majority of his bios were just him being a bad guy. Like, that's one thing. That's one dimension.
Yeah.
Like, it's so now he has depth to him, because it's like, hang on a second, he's not wholly bad, because he's clearly a good dad.
Yeah.
Or at least with the information we have right now. Like, Lord knows, once we get to Noxus, everything that we think we know is going to be turned on its head.
Oh yeah, the question of what would you do to save your daughter is, I mean, it's obvious they pulled that. What Singe became was more of a representation of what they pulled from Oriana's story, in my opinion, because he was willing to go to whatever length to save his daughter, right? And that was the beauty of it. And they were able to take that and make that Singe's story. Is like, what length would you go to for your daughter? And that really touches home with anyone, right?
Yeah.
Or specifically men with daughters. So that, they nailed that. So because they were so responsible with that as a story element, I'm like, yeah, do Oppenheimer. I think you'll do a great job at it. And I think that's the easiest way to do it. If you try to get too fancy with it, I think you're playing with fire.
Yeah. Look, I am an unashamed fan of the Warhammer lore. Like, it is totally okay to just kind of do a little bit of a ripoff and, just to like set the stage for something else. Like,
okay.
Science fiction is full of it. So it's like it's totally fine. Go Oppenheimer. It will fit.
Yeah.
And then show us like the rest of the picture you want to show off of it. Because I can't wait to see it. But everything for Singed is fun. Like, I'm looking for more.
Yeah.
And that's a good place to be when you're waiting for the next installment of a show.
Yeah, and that's a good place to stop. So we've been appreciating, like, we've had a run here of, we took the break from Noxus stuff and Arcane stuff. We gave you guys some episodes about, Hue and some other fun stuff. And now we're back. we're back in it. All right, we're giving you some more because we don't know when this is coming out. So
we can be excited about it again, even though they're gonna turn around and be like, coming to Netflix near you in 2045.
The season could be halfway through the season by the time you hear this episode. And all I want you to know is we tried our best, okay? But with that, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Yeah, take care, everybody.